morning, everyone, and welcome to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority special meeting for December 5th. I would invite myself to read the land acknowledgement before we start. The Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Adirondack, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississauga, the Credit, many who continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaty and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. At the NPCA, we strive to further our commitment to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed in small ways every day. I would now call this meeting to order at 10:02. And could I have Madam Clerk for the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Beatty. Member Clark. Member Cridland. Member Foster.
Present.
Member Grant. Member O'Neill. Member Seaborn. Member Tattison. Member Witteveen. That's quorum, Chair.
And the chair is here as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to be clear. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare? Seeing none, I can move right into our discussion item. Oh, I'm sorry. Approval of the agenda, motion for the agenda for the full Board Authority special meeting held December 5th, 2025 be approved. Could I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Vice Chair Beatty, seconded by Member Seaborn. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move into seeing no conflict of interest earlier. Discussion item, report 3.1, number FA-59-25, regarding draft comments pertaining to ERO 025-1247 regarding proposed boundaries for the regional consolidation of Ontario's conservation authorities. At this time, I'd like to invite CAO Lee Yates to provide some remarks regarding the draft comments prepared for our consideration today.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. The report before you today includes NPCA's draft comment submission on the provincial proposal to consolidate Ontario's 36 conservation authorities into 7 regional conservation authorities. On November 21st, I presented to the board the provincial government's proposal to amend the Conservation Authorities Act to establish the Ontario Provincial Conservation Authority through Bill 68 and the consolidation of Ontario's conservation authorities to the 7 regional conservation authorities. Since that time, Bill 68 received royal assent on November 27th, and the amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act allow for the establishment of the Ontario Provincial Conservation Authority and their objects, which are now in effect. The Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks also provided engagement sessions with conservation authorities and municipal staff. On December 1st, Chair Matt Caff and I attended an in-person session in Vaughan with GTAH and surrounding conservation authorities and municipalities. And on December 2nd, we attended a virtual session with the proposed Western Lake Ontario Regional Conservation Authorities and municipalities. And Member Clark was also in attendance at the December 2nd session as the chair of the Hamilton Conservation Authority and member of NPCA. MECP Minister McCarthy and Chief Conservation Executive Hassan Bassett and MECP staff were present at both these sessions. We appreciate the opportunity to participate in discussions with the Minister and Chief Conservation Executive to provide constructive input to ensure that any future framework for conservation authorities continue to address the unique needs of our watersheds and achieves an effective balance between watershed protection and housing goals. In preparing this ERO submission, staff have considered comments received from the board, NPCA staff, our municipal staff partners, and fellow conservation authorities. I'd like to recognize the efforts of our management team and staff for providing their comments and feedback on the provincial proposal, which has been summarized in the key themes and comments presented in the appendix to the ERO submission. What we've heard clearly through these consultations is that the renewed provincial interest in investing in technology, standardization of policies and processes, and modernization initiatives would provide benefits to conservation authorities, but it cannot come at the risk of natural hazard and watershed management programs and services delivered by conservation authorities and guided by local voices. The proposed Regional Conservation Authority framework would create complexities and risks to local municipal representation and decision-making, local expertise, and delivery of programs and services. Considering the proposed criteria and boundaries for the 7 regional conservation authorities and the uncertainties and risks associated with the proposal, it's recommended to the board that NPCA does not support the proposed RCA framework. The comments outlined in the staff report and the draft ERO submission highlight that the intended goals of the provincial proposal to standardize and modernize the CAs could be coordinated effectively with the current CA framework. Much work has already been achieved by conservation authorities and by the NPCA in particular through the recommendations of the Auditor General report and continued process improvement, which can be leveraged with sustainable, predictable, and equitable provincial investments. And at this time, I'd welcome any questions you may have to staff on the report and the draft ERO submission.
Thank you, Leilani. Are there any questions for CAO Lee Yates? I have Vice Chair Beatty.
What are the next steps? We're going to file this, and from what I've seen, every CA in the province is going to file it, but what's the next step? We wait and see what the ministry and the premier modify it, or are they just going to go ahead with Bill 68?
Thank you for the question. In the engagement sessions, there was a commitment to take the comments received through the ERO submission, but there also seems to be an intention to continue to move forward with looking at further proposals and amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act to bring forward something by the spring of next year. What I gathered through the discussions is that there is a strong desire to have some consolidation of conservation authorities, and that this 7 presented is the preferred framework. Now, it is, a consultation process, so I hope that they hear us as a collective of conservation authorities, that there are serious concerns with how this is being proposed at this time. There's a lot of gaps in information, and the analysis and assessment hasn't been presented on why these 7 or why the consolidation needs to happen to achieve the intended goals. So I would hope they hear that message and give a pause and give consideration. But we also did hear that there is that desire to move forward. So at this time, I think we may need to prepare that something else may be coming.
So if this is Plan A, are you developing a Plan B? Because there's still outstanding questions. Like the one that comes off the page at me is where McCarthy says there will be no layoffs, adding executives will be offered frontline jobs in the new regions. Did they tell you what that meant? Because that's a lot of people put on the line.
Thank you for the question. No, those details haven't been shared at this time with the province. For us and for the other conservation authorities, I know it is a priority to ensure that if they say no staff layoffs, that means no staff layoffs, and that we need to maintain our current complement and the ability to fill additional positions so that we will be able to provide those local programs and services that we currently do and that will be expected of us as we continue to grow as conservation authorities with program delivery. So that is noted in the ERO submission that in order to keep, the strength of the conservation authorities, we need to maintain our staff.
Did they give you some idea of what they defined as executive? Directors?
Thank you. No, they haven't gone into that detail. What I've been able to gather from the sessions is I think there's a vision to maintain local offices, whether they be called, local watershed offices or, local conservation authority offices, that there would be, say, one in Niagara, Hamilton, Halton, and the Credit Valley area, but it would be to the responsibility of these regional conservation authority boards to make those decisions around staffing needs and recruitment and deployment of staff. I also heard some comments that there isn't an expectation, say a planner in Niagara is going to have to check in each day, in an office in Mississauga. So, just reading into what that's signaling, it appears that the vision would be there'd be local offices. But again, the details haven't been provided. And the nature of the engagement sessions is more asking conservation authorities and their municipal partners how this should happen instead of providing the guidance on how it should happen.
And if we move forward, there's the outstanding ownership of all NPCA properties. They're really owned by the municipalities, but they transfer ownership to this new RCA, or does the province take over ownership?
Again, those are the uncertainties and risks that haven't been answered. And in our comments, what we're recommending is before moving forward with any form of amalgamation, to do the proper, cost and legal assessments to look at all assets, financial infrastructure, land holdings, and look at really, what the risk is in terms and process in terms of what amalgamation may mean, and what that might mean to service delivery, but also our municipal funding partners, who we'd be looking for their assistance in this regional conservation authority framework to continue to fund our programs, and that there's a real concern that there's going to be additional levy requirements as a result of it.
Thanks, Leilani. I see we have some hands up in the queue. Member Clark, Member Tatis, and Member Seaborn will go in that order. So, Member Clark.
Good morning, Chair and everyone. I can tell you that the Hamilton Conservation Authority is tackling this from two aspects. They have drafted a resolution opposing the proposal to amalgamate conservation authorities. They also indicate in the proposal that to achieve the stated goals of the minister, it's not necessary to amalgamate municipalities. He simply needs to, through legislation or regulation, prescribe the standards that he wishes every conservation authority to operate under. And if he wants to standardize and digitize the permit application process, that could also be done through that legislation or regulation, and then create a portal that everyone needs to use. We have also, candidly, we ignored the questions. The questions, in my mind, were almost like a corporate transition team, putting in the minds of your employees that we're doing this and help us to make it good. And so we took a different position in that we responded to each of those questions from our perspective of opposing the proposal and suggesting the ways and means that the minister can standardize, digitize, and create prescribed standards for all conservation authorities on any matter that they see fit. We are sharing both the resolution and the ERO with all of the conservation authorities and municipalities. What I'm hearing is that all the municipalities, I shouldn't say all, most municipalities, most conservation authorities, because I cannot confirm if it is all, are taking a similar position in that you don't need to amalgamate. The City of Hamilton has also drafted a resolution which will be debated at Council on Wednesday. The resolution is very similar to where the Conservation Authority is going with some minor tweaks, but we're pushing back. What the minister and Hassan, the conservation executive, the provincial conservation executive, what they are implying is that when the legislation comes forward, all assets, all properties will be assumed by the new provincial conservation authority, or not by the provincial conservation, the new regional conservation authority. So again, we're raising issues in terms of local autonomy. We also raised issues about fundraising. We raised issues about donors who have donated land to us. And what's happening now in the Hamilton area is there is a growing grassroots opposition to this, where they are responding to the ERO, but also writing directly to the Premier and the Minister and all MPPs. That's roughly where we are. And I can state unequivocally that your chair did an excellent job in the session that I was in. In the session that we were in, it was very odd because I think it was just you and me, Chair. And I think there were 4 Ministry of Environment people listening. One was taking notes for us, and she recorded the notes accurately. And we also had the privilege of having someone from the Premier's office simply sitting in and listening. They didn't put their camera on and they never spoke. So I think they are getting the message. I don't know what's driving this, Chair. I don't know whether or not the Premier of Ontario said to Hassan, here's what you're going to do, or whether or not Hassan went to the Premier and said, have I got an idea for you? We can do regional consolidation and create a new provincial conservation authority, and I can be the executive. We don't know what's driving this, other than a lot of speculation that it is about freeing up conservation land for developers to build housing. And that's our real concern in all of this. Let's not forget that the province required every conservation authority to draft up a complete inventory of our lands and how we purchased them, where they came from, etc. It was not shared with the province, but we all have that file in our offices now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Clark. Well said. Thank you. Member Tattison.
Hi, I was just going to comment about, I guess, what Member Beattie asked, and I think Member Clark touched on about Plan B or our next steps. And I thought that, from my point of view, I'm going to write a message in my next Christmas newsletter to my residents, encouraging them to contact the local MPPs. And I guess I was looking for guidance because I may get a little bit passionate about it, and I don't want to put the NCPA in a position where they're, I guess, viewed as not working with the government. But I would like to say, like, if though we're in opposition to it, I don't want to be disparaging towards it. So I'll be looking for some guidance once I write that letter. to share with NPCA staff or Leilani to just, see if that's okay, and maybe take some suggestions. Would that be okay?
Leilani or Melanie, could you comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. And Member Taddison, yes, we would, and any members, if you wish to provide any communication or messaging out to your constituents or member organizations, myself and Melanie and Erica would be happy to provide you with some notes and help you draft those messages.
And thank you. And then my second question would be, is the NPCA going to be sharing this information through local newspapers or advertisements in local, what I'm trying to say is just, is there going to be a more public approach?
Thank you through the chair. Yes, we'll be drafting a media release in response to the direction from the board today and the comments that we have and concerns.
Thank you very much. And I guess just I'll take it up with Councillor Clark offline, but I was just kind of wondering about how much freedom we have in expressing his concerns that they're freeing up conservation lands in order for development. Is that something we want to put out there and try and challenge them on their narrative? Councillor Clark?
If I may, Chair, I was opining as to speculating what their motivation is.
Mm-hmm.
Everything points to that. They're requiring conservation authorities to review their land inventory. Then they create a regional conservation authority, which takes the local autonomy away. And we will just be a couple of voices on the larger regional conservation authority, which I believe has CAO Burnside calculated 28 member municipalities. So you'd have a very significantly sized board, or we will lose an awful lot of local autonomy. Either way, if we're only one or two voices on a large board, we have lost all of our local autonomy, because as it stands right now, the NPCA stands alone, as does the HCA. And so if the lands are being assumed by the regional conservation authority, then we no longer have the ability locally to protect those lands from sale for housing.
Okay, thanks. I guess that affects our strategies as well when we try to acquire land, through ways where families donate it because they want it preserved. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Clark, or Member Clark. I'm finished.
Thank you, Member Taddison and Member Clark. Member Seaborn up next, and then Member Foster here in the room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of our members have already touched on some of the things. Assets was a big concern of mine, whether it's the land holdings or buildings or fundraising. The province has said that they would cover the costs of this new level of bureaucracy for the next 2 to 3 years. Is that just to cover their level, or are they talking about covering the whole cost of running the conservation authorities? And then my question is, what happens after that? I have two more questions after this, but if there's some comment as far as what happens after the first 2 or 3 years.
Thanks, Member Seaborn. Leilani, can you handle that one? Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. What we've heard through these engagement sessions is the province is willing to commit, 2 to 3 years to cover the costs of the provincial agency, not necessarily the costs that the conservation authorities themselves would need to incur, and then directly to any municipalities as sources of funding to help pay for those costs, to harmonize any processes, harmonize salaries and benefits, any equipment purchases, software purchases, et cetera, that would be required and be part of a directive from this provincial agency to these new regional conservation authorities. So noted in our comments is that if the province pursues and rolls this out, they should be covering all the costs associated with any transition and post-transition of any of those directives or actions that the conservation authorities would need to implement.
Thank you for that. Through you, Mr. Chair. The province is very good at implementing programs which they download on municipalities and being part of the budget process, which I'm sure everybody in the room is currently in. It's getting a little disheartening when we have to keep putting it back on our residents. Hamilton, of course, has got experience with amalgamation. I heard Member Clark mention that. It's a platform which has had some negative pushback even to this day. So my next question, it's rhetorical, I don't expect an answer. Is this going to become another Greenbelt program? We know that the pushback from all residents in Ontario over the Greenbelt when they found out that the purpose of this was to build on protected land. I consider conservation area land as protected. I mean, people have donated it. They've reached out to the NPCA and said, we have a piece of land that we'd like to see protected so it's not under development. And if our suspicions are true, this is where we're headed. I think we really need to put out a public outcry because this is the feeling. People need to know more of what could happen once the province has taken over. And that's it for today. As I said, it's a rhetorical question. I really don't need an answer to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Seaborn. I have Member Foster here in the room, and then Member Goodland after Member Foster. Member Foster?
Well, thank you, Chair Metcalf. So I'm going to get my sarcasm out of the way first, just so that I feel better about it. Those ERO questions and through to Member Clark, I'm really glad you guys didn't follow those because they more or less said, isn't this great? And how are we going to make it greater? And gosh, it's so great. We need to have even more superlatives that are coming into play with this. So I'm glad you guys did what you did. I'm amazed that, the province is providing us 3.6% funding into the NPCA, and I'm amazed at how they're able to have such influence going into play out of a system that they really have no skin in the game. I mean, let's be perfectly frank when this is all said and done. And my last sarcastic comment before I get into what I really want to say is, I've always believed that developing a new, larger bureaucracy always gains efficiencies. So, let's just keep that one in mind. It never happens. Brad has lived this in Hamilton. Any other organization that's gone through this, it ends up being a cluster of some variety. So I'm going to go and speak to the budget that was presented to us at Regional Council last week. And one of the slides that was on that is an amazing slide that we need to be, as the NPCA, reminding ourselves of as we're going into all of this. We have the largest jurisdiction within these areas. We have the lowest operating budget. That's important to keep in mind. Lowest number of staff. We have the largest amount of shoreline, probably of just about any organization or conservation area within Ontario. And looking at the holdings, we're about the same as all the rest of them. I'm hugely concerned getting into bed with Halton and Credit Valley. These are obviously big, expensive organizations, and somebody's going to end up having to foot the bill to help these guys out. I mean, I'm really concerned that, we've spent so much time and effort developing what I would consider to be a pretty efficient organization down here, and now we have to deal with the ones that, for all intents and purposes, I believe, are somewhat out of control. I mean, it's obvious just with this screen. And by the way, Hamilton isn't one, Brad. You're good. So you guys are very efficient and wonderful. I don't know. I'm very interested in the motion that you guys are going to be doing in Hamilton, to our Hamilton members. I've organized so that we're going to be on the agenda for this upcoming Thursday night at our council as well. I'm acting regional chair right at the moment, so I have a little influence on that. But we're going to be bringing whatever motion it is that we come up with here. I'd like to see what Hamilton is putting forward as well, and perhaps maybe that may be an alternate that we may be putting in to this. And just the last thing, I very proudly was chair of this organization for 2 years. My family has been involved with the NPCA since day one. My wife's family have been involved with Long Beach and right throughout. This is a very resilient organization. This has been an organization that, frankly, has kind of had their act together, even though there was a little bit of a blip a few years ago. But we have and I wasn't here for that. But I can tell you, and I know Mr. Beattie talks about this all the time, the fact that we actually have a report from a critical source here in the province of Ontario that says this is the way you need to be, and we have adopted what it is that we were told to do with this. I really, truly don't understand why there needs to be changes going down the road with any of this. I always look at issues of this type. What's the problem they're trying to solve? Is it planning that's the problem? I mean, we hear this all the time. The NPCA is they're taking their time and they're actually doing their job and examining a planning issue, and they're slowing us down. Well, I'm sorry, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm going to totally agree with Member Clark again. If the province wants to set standards or want to do something else that's going along with it, not a problem. Knock your socks off, guys. We can go and do that as well as anyone else, and we've proven that we have in the past. So, anyway, there's just my ramblings for a Friday morning, and I'm looking forward to our motion, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you're doing in Hamilton as well, guys.
Great. Thank you, Member Foster. Member Cridlin.
Member Cridland, you're on mute, sorry.
I've had the benefit of all the commentary, so it's obvious, I think, maybe to staff and the public that the work that's been brought forward today by all the efforts of those involved is a very strong statement. I might ask this board again, just is it strong enough for where it is, where we want to land today? And again, I very much appreciate Member Beattie looking forward already for us. So when I looked at this report, for me, what jumped out is that the effort that the government is making to do what they say in terms of these objects, it doesn't match. All these things could have been done CA driven or a small consultant over top. So the overhead they're setting up doesn't match what they're saying. So maybe that's a sarcastic comment, but we've done a good job, I think, in making our unique comments about Niagara. And again, when the public goes to here, for people to resonate what strikes them the most, where they would like.
Member Cridlin, if I may, you're breaking up.
So I saw, contrast for our shoreline, the know, this member Foss mentioned, which is all public as well. So, yes, okay. At work. The actual report, I know we're planning to send it to the AMO, and I might just suggest we also add Roma to that list, because the agricultural aspect and the unsupported municipalities that this, like it's dramatic what it does to the the rural communities. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, great comments, Member Cridland, regarding our mail out list, AMO and Roma especially. I see Member Clark has his hand back up. We'll back to Member Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just some follow-up. So they did indicate that they are wanting all assets, so all buildings, any properties of the conservation authorities, our reserves, all of our money in our banks, everything is to be merged up into the new regional conservation authority. A question has come up in Hamilton about all the donations and what happens to our foundations. Now, Hamilton's Conservation Foundation, which I don't believe is unique, it has its own letters of incorporation, and it's a registered charity. And in the letters of incorporation and in the registered charity documentation, it indicates that they raise funds for the Hamilton Conservation Authority for land acquisition, education purposes, etc. You may need to seek legal advice. I think the conservation foundations have solid ground to resist any merger because they really don't fall under the Conservation Authorities Act. They're not enabled by the Conservation Authority Act. They are unique organizations. So if the government of Ontario does this, then each conservation foundation around the province of Ontario is going to have to revisit whether or not they continue to raise funds for the conservation authority, the regional conservation authority, or they decide to raise fund for environmental issues elsewhere in their community. So you may need to seek legal advice to ensure that you're on solid grounds, that all of the money that you've raised and the purpose of the conservation foundations stands. To Member Cridland's comment, I kind of think she's bang on. The HCA, we receive, believe it or not, less than 1% provincial funding. We get approximately 37% from the member municipalities, which includes the township of Puslinch. And everything else is self-generated. So it's generated from our membership program, which we have 10,000 paid members. It's generated by our gating system for all of our conservation authorities. It's generated through contracts that we have with the city of Hamilton to run the Confederation Park Wild Waterworks. So we are struggling to see that we're actually receiving less than 1% provincial funding. We're still balancing our books all the time, and we are a lean machine, undoubtedly. It strikes me as odd, as Member Cridland said, the province will be spending a great deal of money to orchestrate this proposal, which stands in stark contrast to the funding of conservation authorities. So something just doesn't fit. As to the Hamilton resolution, it was approved by Planning Committee this week. It will be ratified by Council on Wednesday. Around lunchtime today, the clerk will publish our City Council agenda. I will copy that resolution and forward it to Melanie. I'm not sure who you want me to forward it to, and then you can distribute it to the members of this Conservation Authority. Hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Member Clark, and great comments regarding the foundations and their fundraising arm of the authority as well. Yeah, lots of unanswered questions, and when you think about it, between Hamilton and the Niagara Conservation Authorities, they really only fund a little over 4% of the total budgets in this massive area if you combined even just Hamilton and Niagara together. So to mirror Member Foster's comments, they really don't have a lot of skin in the game to facilitate why they're doing what they're doing. So excellent comments. I do have another hand up here in the room, and Vice Chair Beatty.
Yeah, my apologies to start with because I'm hung up on ownership. And I'm gonna take a long shot and ask a question and I don't expect an answer. Is there any way that we can transfer the ownership of our properties back to the municipalities? Like sell them back to them for $1 so that their protected ownership is with the people who have paid to develop them and buy them? That's it may be a silly question, but if we have a legal ability to transfer the ownership of our properties to the municipalities, that might protect them against the encroachment of the province. And the other one is Plan C. We could always recommend that, yes, we agree with merging as long as it's Hamilton merging with the NPCA. That would be a logical merge if you're looking to merge and reduce the number. And they could probably take it from 36 to 18 or 36 to 16 if that's the motivation. Maybe that's Plan C. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vice Chair Beatty. You make a valid point there. And I just looked over at my colleague here, and could we transfer them to the foundation and being protected? We'd need a legal opinion on that, but transferring them back to the municipality would then give the municipality rights over that. And we all have seen with strong mayor's power what can happen. So I don't know if that would be an option to transfer properties to the foundation. But having said that, again, that's crystal ball kind of stuff. So I do have Member Foster with his hand back up again. Oh, Leilani, would you like to comment? Sorry.
Yeah, if it comes to that, I think we would need to look at what that plan is to ensure that those lands stay in a local type of ownership for the purpose of why they were secured or donated. The comments we put forward was, should this proceed, all assets, liabilities, including land holdings, would stay with those local offices. So we would continue to manage and own them, and however that is legally recognized under a regional conservation authority to be determined. But I think through the engagement sessions and discussions I've been in, it's been clear that people have made great efforts to entrust these properties with the conservation authorities for the purposes of protection and recreation and really in perpetuity for the public good, and they should remain so and should be managed at a local level. So that is something that we've put forward in our comments that echoes with other conservation authorities, and we can definitely, when the time comes, if the time comes, look at the role of the foundation, and there need to be further work with the foundation to look at it as an entity, because as Member Clark said, it is to support the work and activities of the NPCA, and if the NPCA doesn't exist, then there's a risk the foundation is void and nullified. So we would need to work with them to look at their objects, and maybe there's amendments to that as part of their corporate entity, but that is an option we can look at. And then you were asking about what Plan C is, and what we also heard with some of our discussions is why doesn't the province look at the source protection areas and regions as logical, larger boundaries for consolidation, because those are based on watershed principles. And for the NPCA, we would stand alone because we have the Niagara Peninsula Source Water Protection Authority specific to us. And then that would probably bring 36 down to, I think, 19 conservation authorities if it's based on that boundary. And the complexity of the proposed Western Lake Ontario Conservation Authority is CVC is part of a larger source protection region, Toronto and Central Lake Ontario. And this consolidation for Conservation Authority boundaries may then require further amendments to the Clean Water Act and updates to source protection plans if there's then a realignment of authorities and regions to those new Conservation Authority boundaries. So again, the complexities of thinking about how this would work overlaid with other Conservation Authority responsibilities and legislation.
Thanks, Leilani. I have Member Foster again.
Thanks. And just out of curiosity, and I'm sure we have a list like this somewhere, but we have all of these properties within the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Do we know where they all came from? So in other words, we do. Okay, I'm seeing Lee's nodding her head, because that in itself would be fascinating to go through and review, because the taxpayers of the region of Niagara paid for property X, then why the hell are we going and uploading that into a far greater scenario type of thing? So I think, anyway, there's I think there's maybe some additional analysis we should be doing on some of these things as it's going on, just to make sure that it's all clearly understood. Oh, everybody's moving everything down. So anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you, Member Foster. Yeah, whether, they were purchased or donated or...
Donations? Okay, so...
Yep.
Yeah, so donations type of thing. So let's take the example of Balls Falls. That was donated to the Conservation Authority. And who originally had that? Like, that's the type of thing that I think we need to be going back and reviewing further. Maybe as what this is being unwound, maybe this is a scenario where it doesn't even make sense. Maybe the living relatives that have gone on with this are saying absolutely not. I don't want somebody in Mississauga telling me what's going on with something in Jordan Village type of thing. So anyway, just random mumblings. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Foster. That was brought up in one of the sessions on Monday. Was the some of our properties are named after the historic families that have been in the area and have handed down the properties to the authority, the Conservation Authority. So they were worried about losing the naming. Again, local autonomy. Again, local history, local knowledge, things that could be lost in the greater scope of things when things become much bigger. So. Member Clark, hand back up again.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just things that I've learned as I've been digging into this process. I just thought I'd share it with you, and then you can deal with it yourselves. The land inventory that all conservation authorities were required to build includes where the lands came from. The Conservation Authorities Act dictates that any lands that were purchased through funding that was received from the province, the minister has to be brought into the discussion of the sale of the land, and there has to be public consultation on the sale of the land. So looking at your land inventory would really provide you guidance in that regard. I can also advise that the Hamilton Conservation did seek legal advice about easements and covenants and how the province can or can't assume the lands that were purchased by donations and bequests and things like that. I can't provide you what we learned from the lawyer, but I would encourage you to have a municipal lawyer look at the act and provide advice in terms of options should it come to that.
Great, thanks, Member Clark. Are there any more questions around the table? We've had quite a fulsome discussion here and comments, and I appreciate everyone's participation. So seeing none, we'll have a motion here, and I'll need a member or a mover and seconder to get the motion on the floor. Moved by Member Clark, second by Vice Chair Beatty. So I'll read the motion that report number FA-59-25 regarding draft comments pertaining to the ERO 025-1257 regarding proposed boundaries for the regional consolation of Ontario's conservation authorities be received, and that the draft submission for Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority comments on the ERO 025-1257 as appended be approved, and that a copy of the final submission for the NPCA comments on ERO 025-1257 be forwarded to the Niagara region, the lower tier municipalities within the Niagara region, City of Hamilton, Haldeman County, Mississauga, the Credit First Nation, Six Nations on the Grand River, Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Committee, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Conservation Ontario, and all conservation authorities in Ontario. And could I make a small amendment to add Roma on that list as well? Oh, I'm sorry. Just I'm going to hand it over to the clerk for a moment.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. So I did make note of Member Cridland's request to include Roma. Earlier, I had a brief discussion with Member Vice Chair Beatty for a friendly amendment to include local area MPPs as well. Both additions friendly, so if it's, all good with the members, we can include those and vote with those included both in this motion and the motion under item 4.1 for later.
Okay, so we're just looking around, everyone in agreement. I see thumbs up from Member Clinton, the hand nods from everyone else on the, excellent, thank you. Member Foster, comment or hand up? Comment, Member Foster, yep.
So a couple of things. First off, and to the mover and seconder, and no disrespect, you're both from Hamilton. Can I get one of you to let one of the Niagara ones? I think it's important politically that we do that. So Member Seaborn hopefully will be the mover or seconder for that. So we got a Niagara name on it. Secondly, so the discussion, I really like the discussion earlier from Member Clark about us doing, asking for legal opinion on the properties. And I'm not sure, for the sake of this meeting, is this something I have to tack on to the motion, or is this something we can treat as a separate motion at this time? I think it's an important motion for our board, but I just want to make sure we do it properly based on rules of procedure here. So question, I guess, through to you guys on that.
I'll defer to the clerk on that as far as procedurally adding a motion or just adding to this motion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Foster. Based on the contents of both motions that are the one with the report and the one that's meant for circulation, I would suggest that if the board is interested in providing a motion for legal opinion, we draft a separate motion that would not be included in any circulation. So, and just staff can take that away and bring that back.
So I think it's important, if we're going to do it, we do it now. I think it's, and so is it appropriate from, because this wasn't on the agenda to begin with, and we do not have an other business section within this, so I'm looking for consensus among the board that it would be appropriate for us to bring forward such a motion.
I concur with Member Foster. So do we need to weave our procedural bylaw, or can we just forge ahead, create the motion, vote on it here now as Member Foster presents? If there's an appetite for that around the table, we could absolutely do that. Let's deal with this motion first, and then we'll we'll move on to that. Member Foster, you have, okay. All right, so I do have a mover and seconder for that motion, so I will call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Unanimous.
Chair, I can't use my camera because of my bandwidth, so sorry, I'll just use my icon. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cullen. That was noted. Thank you. So just in the advice of the clerk, we're going to work on the motion that Member Foster had brought forward about seeking legal advice. So I'll take that as Member Foster moves. Could I get a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Member Seaborn. Thank you. So do we need to read the motion out for the vote? So Madam Clerk is working on the motion. So now we'll move over to 4.1. Okay. Okay. So we're item 4.1, Niagara NPCA position on the consolidation of Ontario's conservation authorities. Based on discussion at the full authority meeting on November 25th, a motion has been prepared for the board's consideration. Can I get a mover and seconder for the motion provided? Then I'll open the floor for discussion. So can I get a mover to get that onto the floor? Moved by Vice Chair.
I'll move, Chair.
Booty, moved by Vice Chair Beatty, seconded by Member Grant. And now the floor open for discussion on 4.1.
It's Member Cridlin. Sorry, Chair. Could you perhaps read it once more for us? Thank you.
Well, I'll read the motion. Whereas the municipalities of Niagara Peninsula watershed agree to form the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority in 1959 under the Conservation Authorities Act to protect people, property, farmland, and natural resources through watershed-based decision-making informed by local science and knowledge and municipal representation. And whereas the provincial government has amended the Conservation Authorities Act through Bill 68, planned to protect Ontario budget measures that allow for establishing the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency to oversee the transition to regional conservation authorities and to direct the strategic direction, finances, and operational activities of the new regional conservation authorities, imposing additional costs on municipalities to fund the agency via fees levied on the new regional conservation authority. And whereas the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks has posted environmental registry notice number 025-1257, proposed boundaries for the regional consolidation of Ontario's conservation authorities, proposing to reduce Ontario's 36 conservation authorities to 7 regional entities as part of a broader restructuring. And whereas under this proposal, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority would be consolidated into the new Western Lake Ontario Regional Conservation Authority, together with the Hamilton Conservation Authority, Halton Region Conservation Authority, and Credit Valley Conservation, forming a single organization extending the Western Lake Ontario shoreline from Niagara through Halton and Peel, encompassing urban and rural watershed that support the Greater Toronto-Hamilton corridor. And whereas the proposed Western Lake Ontario Regional Conservation Authority is to span approximately 4,900 square kilometers and serve 28 municipalities comprised of nearly 2 million people, thereby risking local representation and the delivery of locally focused programs and services. And whereas the participating municipalities lying within NPCA's jurisdiction fund approximately 52% of the annual operating budget of the NPCA through municipal levies compared to the annual provincial transfer payment of approximately 0.5%. And whereas in September 2018, the Auditor General of Ontario published their report on the special audit of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority with 20 recommendations to the Conservation Authority and 4 recommendations to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks to improve governance, operation, policies, and processes to strengthen the delivery of programs and services, which have been fully implemented by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, who is committed to continuous improvement. And whereas watershed municipalities benefit from having Conservation Authority staff available locally that know our watershed, municipal staff, communities, Indigenous community representatives, developers, consultants, and environmental non-government agencies. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the NPCA Board of Directors does not support the proposed Western Lake Ontario Regional Conservation Authority boundary configuration outlined in Environmental Registry Notice 025-1257 as a proposal lacks sufficient justification, would significantly diminish local governance, and fails to recognize the effectiveness and efficiencies already achieved within the existing watershed-based models, and that the board affirms that large-scale regional consolidation is unnecessary, would introduce substantial transitional costs, and would divert resources away from frontline watershed programs, and that the board further asserts that restructuring at this scale would erode local decision-making, weaken municipal accountability, and disrupt long-standing community partnerships that are central to delivering responsive watershed management, and that the board urges the province to strengthen centralized standards, resources, and communication rather than undertaking broad structural amalgamation, and to provide sustainable, predictable provincial funding across conservation authorities, particularly where gaps exist, to enable local conservation authorities to advance ongoing digitization and systemization work that has already resulted in improved efficiencies and consistencies in recent years. And that the board requests the ministry engage in meaningful and collaboratively with affected municipalities, conservation authorities, and local First Nations before advancing any consultation to ensure that any changes reflect both local needs and practical realities of implementation, and that the board believes that the province's proposed new online permitting portal can be implemented within the existing Conservation Authority framework without requiring structural amalgamation, and that this resolution be included as part of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation's submission to the Environmental Registry of Ontario and forwarded to Niagara Region, the lower tier municipalities within the Niagara Region, City of Hamilton, Haldimand County, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Six Nations of the Grand River, Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Committee, Association of Ontario, AMO, Conservation Ontario, and all conservation authorities, including Roma and all local area MPPs. So that is the motion, Member Cridlin. Please don't make me read it again. I hope everybody got that. So that's, Member Foster.
Yeah, thank you. And so, and this is going to be a question actually back to Member Clark as well on this. The third last point in this talks about the fact that where gaps exist to enable local conservation authorities to advance ongoing digitization and systemization work that has already resulted in improved efficiency and consistency in recent years. And you know, the provincial government is frankly hung up on building homes and the planning issues and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, in this line, you know, as perhaps a slight addendum to it, is to basically say, and has allowed our conservation authority to, I don't know, provide those services required for planning and for more homes being, I don't know, like something like that. Like I just sometimes think the provincial government likes to hear that at least we understand, you know, what the heck they're trying to do with some of these things. It might not be necessary, but I just am wondering if maybe something like that might be included. I don't know, Brad, I don't know if you have a view on that one.
I'm a little bit trepidatious with regards to including housing in this proposal, because if that is their end goal, they may choose to use the NPCA as rationale for selling off lands for housing. So I'm not quite sure what the intent is. Maybe I'm completely wrong in terms of what you're asking.
Yeah, no, I was just, yeah, we don't have to do it. I'm again, just more or less random thoughts, but you know, they're so hung up on all of this stuff, and we've done everything that has been asked so far to make our processes efficient in all of these areas type of thing, and I'm just wondering if it's somehow appropriate to basically say, we've done everything you've asked, and now, you know, type of thing. Anyway, we don't have to.
So,
Maybe it's just understood within it as well.
so one of the driving rationale from the province is to make conservation authorities transparent and accountable. That one really has irked us in Hamilton because we are transparent and accountable. And I think of all the work that the NPCA did to improve their governance structure, and all of it was done publicly. And you really turned around the NPCA. And so it just kind of irks me that they are implying that the conservation authorities are not doing their job, and we are.
I'm good. Not to do any changes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Member Foster. Thank you, Member Clark, for the comments. I see Member Cridland have, go ahead.
Thank you, through Chair. I'm hoping it might be building on those two comments, and if not, it's also very strong as is. But I also kind of thought that one of the last and whereases does capture exactly what you just expressed, in where, you know, given the past for huge bills, and we'll frame it properly. Our PCA has done everything said. In fact, we're at a 9, given we're at 96%, at the guts of 90%. So some of it's captured, but it's also an and around what's thrown at us for bills and our 96% somehow. And then you can, one of the, and that's the last one, second last one. And I would say the board is certain the province is onward could implement it, but that might just be my, but it's very comprehensive. Thank you, Chair.
Member Cridland, most of that was broken up. If you could condense it and give it to us again. I noticed that, yeah, just speak directly right into the microphone on your laptop there. It seems like when you move away from it is when you break up. So if you could give that to us again, please, Member Cridland. My
apologies, Chair. Sorry. So the idea was to the last and whereas to include or capture a combination of Member Foster, Member Clark around we've done so well in the context of being targeted as conservation authorities in the last out of four of the last major bills, and using that 96% standard that we've achieved of the government standard. So if that cap, that's something that still could be done. I'm not suggesting it's, it's just a suggestion. And then my last comment was the second, and that I would strengthen it if the board agrees that the board is certain the province's proposed new online portal could be implemented. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Member Cridlin. I think we caught that. Leilani pointed out where it states 96% of the timelines are being met by the provincial standard. If it's the board's wish, we could add that to include that what we are showing here locally at the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Okay, so we got a thumbs up from Member Clark, Member Tattison, Member Seaborn, Vice Chair Beatty, Member Foster, myself. I see that that we have a majority that have weighed in on adding that comment of the 96% achievement rate to the amendment, friendly amendment. So the clerk is just typing that now. So we'll just wait for the finished product. I don't have to read the motion again, hopefully, that everybody understands the friendly amendment. So we've just added Member Cridlin's friendly amendment. NPCA has constantly met provincial permitting review standards 96% of the time. Is everybody happy with the wording? Okay, seeing some nods, thumbs up around the table. So we'll move ahead with that. So I already have a mover and seconder for the motion. I'll call the vote now. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Seeing none, that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And no closed session. Oh, yes, we have one more motion to cover, which was brought out on the floor this morning under new business, kind of an amendment to the agenda. So if the clerk would like to read out the motion, we can get a mover and seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as moved by Member Foster and seconded by Member Seaborn earlier, we've drafted a motion that states that staff be directed to seek legal opinion pertaining to NPCA's land holdings and potential implications for NPCA's assets related to the proposed regional consolidation of conservation authorities, and that legal opinion be brought forward to the full authority meeting scheduled December 19th, 2025 for the board's consideration.
So I'll take the mover as Member Foster that brought that motion forward. I need a seconder. And Member Cridlin will second that motion. Thank you. So the motion has been read out. Can I get, we already have mover and seconder. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Chair.
Oh,
sorry.
before we count the vote, yeah, Member Cridlin, comment?
Again, thank you for reading that out. Does that automatically include the foundation, just sort of through the umbrella of that, or is it appropriate to include that at this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cridlin. At this time, we're just kind of seeking legal advice on our assets. So we'll know further then maybe by what legal direction we have, what's available to the organization.
Thank you. I'm happy to support.
Great. Thank you. Any more comment before we'll call the vote? So all those in favor?
In favor, Chair.
Oh, Member Grant, was that a comment or in favor? Okay.
Nope, just stating I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. That is carried unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. And at this time, I will call for adjournment. So, oh, sorry, Member Beatty, comment?
No, not a comment. That's a dummy. Just a quick question for our CAO. Are there any conservation authorities in the province of Ontario in favor of this thing? Or have we got 36 no's? Oh, sorry.
I will hand this over to Leilani at the present here.
Thank you. Through the chair, some conservation authorities have yet to receive their board motions and resolutions on it. So I can't speak for all conservation authorities, but the ones we've been engaged with so far have definitely raised the concerns, and some of them have received the motions, such as Hamilton, Credit Valley within our area, and then today is ours. Halton, their board meeting is December 12th, for your information, at which time we'll see which way, they will be directing staff and what their motion's going to look like. But we've seen so far several of the 36 have received their board motions that state they're not in favor of it. And I think in the next 2 weeks, we'll be seeing the rest heading to their boards and what their final resolutions will be.
So the result hopefully will be unanimous. That there would be all the conservation authorities united in one front that we don't want this. That might help.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
Thank you, Vice Chair Beatty. Okay, so we have Member Clark. Before we wrap up, go ahead.
Yes, Leilani is correct in her statement. The only caveat I would add is that Halton Conservation Authority has invited Hassan to the board meeting. And since he came from Halton, I'm not sure what the outcome is going to be, but just be aware of it.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more comments, I will ask for mover and seconder. Move to adjourn this NPCA meeting at 11:20 a.m. Can I get a mover? Moved by Member Foster, seconded by Vice Chair Beatty. All those in favor of adjournment? That is carried unanimously. Enjoy the weekend. And if I may, there is a light up festivities in Cayuga tonight in Haldeman County. So if you'd like to drive out to the countryside, I'm just going to put a little plug in there. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Merry Christmas, everybody.